Let's go.
Let's go. Oh,
Do you want to?
sorry. I'll let you.
Next one.
I'm excited and I feel relaxed and I'm ready to party. Let's say sorry. You don't need to do that. You don't need to apologize. It's a fucked up female habit. You don't need to be sorry for anything ever. Can you guess what every woman's worst nightmare is?
I don't have razor juice.
I have nothing to prove to you.
When I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better.
I say when it comes to stardom and Lauren, there are no accidents.
Hi, Karen Peterson.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Citizen Dame, the podcast where we got really excited before we even started recording, and now we're gonna have to calm ourselves down for a minute. I'm Lauren Humphries Brooks, and with me, as always, is Karen Peterson. Hello, Karen.
Hello.
We were really worked up right before we recorded.
Yeah, and we should
We
be.
should.
Yes.
But actually, our topic today is a good topic in a lot of ways, because like it's a celebration.
It is.
And it is in fact it's Women's History Month, which we are very excited about. And
Yes.
we totally 100% planned it like this, that we were going to talk about films, Best Picture nominees directed by women. And we're going to talk about the ones that got nominated this year for Best Picture, which is a good thing. We have multiple films directed by women that have been nominated and also focused on women. It's like all three of these films are very female centric.
Yeah.
Which is nice. So it isn't just like women, and I don't mean to denigrate like other women's efforts. Women making movies about men, I think, is very important as well. But it's nice to see that these films are getting recognized as well.
The Power of the Dog is still one of my favorite movies of the last 10 years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, female directors, as we've seen, have wonderful and amazing insights into masculinity, and it's something that should be discussed. Women should absolutely be making those films. I think that's more that I think it's nice to see the Academy actually recognizing films that are focused on female characters in a very deep and complicated way. And it's not always, good or nice female characters.
Yeah.
People that you actually feel very complicated about. So that's
Wait, are you saying women are allowed to be complicated?
That's pretty positive.
Crazy talk.
I'm pretty positive that we're not. We have to be perfect constantly. We can't. Yeah, no. We either have to be perfect or we have to be evil bitches, one or the other.
I mean, in one of the documentaries we're going to discuss today, that's exactly what we're told.
So before we get going on this, just like some stats, and this is part of the reason why we were getting so upset.
We were pre-gaming with stats and
earlier
worked ourselves up a little bit.
So a few reminders about the history of particularly female directors and Best Picture nominated films from the Academy. And Karen can correct me if I get anything wrong here. So first of all, a total of 22 films directed by women have been nominated for Best Picture in the history of the Academy. That Correct. Is out of 601 films. So 601 films that have been nominated for Best Picture, 22 of them have been directed by women. And I just want people to think about that for a minute. Just consider. And I know all of the arguments, and if you're listening to this podcast, you definitely know that the arguments are bullshit, but the arguments are like, oh, women weren't directing very much. Oh, women didn't really have a big influence in early cinema, all of that shit. No, that's not true. Yes, there were far fewer female directors working within the studio system. We've talked about Dorothy Arzner. We've talked about people like Lois Weber in silent cinema. We've talked about early cinema. So yes, there are fewer women working, but women have been involved in filmmaking and in directing for a very long time.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in here just because we definitely have talked about this in previous episodes, but I know we also have some new listeners. Hi, folks. And so I just wanted to kind of contextualize this even a little bit more, kind of break this down a little bit more. So the first Academy Awards happened in the 1927-1928 film year. And we had back to back, it's our first female screenwriter, Frances Marion, to win, the first woman to win an Oscar for writing, becomes also the first human to win back-to-back Oscars for anything when she wins in 1929 and 1930. The first film directed by a woman to be nominated for any sort of Oscar for anything is in 1930. So this is the second or third Oscars. That is Sarah and Son, directed by Dorothy Arzner. Then throughout the like, you get one short film gets nominated in 1933, and then you don't get another woman nominated for any film that they directed until the 50s. So 1927 to 1950, you've had 2 films directed by women nominated for anything at all, even though women are actively working. And then in the 50s and 60s, you get some short films. You do get Paw by Astrid Henning Jensen is nominated for foreign language film. Nancy Hamilton is nominated for a documentary. And so you get a few here and there. And then in the 70s, we start to see this happening more. Elaine May's The Heartbreak Kid gets nominated for 2 Academy Awards. Joan Micklin Silver's Hester Street gets nominated for something. And then it's not until 1976 that we get our first woman in the directing category. And that is Lena Wertmuller. She directed Seven Beauties. It was nominated for 4 Academy Awards: director, lead actor, writing, and foreign language film. Not nominated for Best Picture. So Lauren, when was the first female directed movie nominated for Best Picture, and what was it?
No, you went through all of that, and now 1930?
No.
No.
Sorry, the first one nominated for Best Picture, not nominated for an Oscar, just Best Picture. So we have our first director in 1976. When is the first picture nominated?
Oh, 1986, 10 years later, right. Correct?
Yeah. Yep. And it is Children of a Lesser God.
Yeah, I remember.
Directed by Randa Haynes. Yeah.
I remember talking about this. Yeah.
Yeah. So it takes from 1927 to 1986 before any movie directed by a woman is nominated for Best Picture. And they're making movies. It's not like they just suddenly in the 80s got to make movies again. They were making them all along. And so from 1986 to now, 22 have been nominated for Best Picture. It makes me so mad.
Yeah.
It makes me so mad.
It is. It's just maddening. And you know what? We've talked about these statistics before. And in fact, I think we did. I'll link when we post this episode. We'll also link the other episode where we went into a lot of detail about this, because you know all of this shit. I always forget dates. But so we've talked about this before, and it's still maddening, because the thing is, we can never go back and fix this. Which should be fixed, right? It's always going to be there. So is it a good thing that now we're getting more films directed by women nominated? Yes, it is. Is it a good thing that we are getting more female directors nominated? Absolutely, it is. It is a wonderful thing. It does not denigrate the abilities and the quality of the work that these women are doing, but it is maddening to listen to some of these things and be like, how fucking dare you, basically. And some of the women that you just listed, Joan Micklin Silver, Elaine May, going back, Dorothy Arzner, people who deserve to have their work recognized, period. We talked about Elaine May and Mikey and Nikki a while ago, last month or so. And just rewatching that film should be discussed in the same breath as Taxi Driver and as The Godfather. And it fucking isn't. It isn't, because it is 110% because it was directed by Elaine May and not by Martin Scorsese or Francis Ford Coppola. And again, nothing to denigrate those two men. They are fantastic filmmakers. But we should be hearing Elaine May's name in the same fucking breath as that. And it makes me so mad.
Absolutely. And it's also part of why I get so mad when I get told, and this is what really got us going before we started recording, but like when we have a situation where a woman gets into the lineup or none do. And it's like, well, just be glad that this happened. There's always this expectation of a trade-off, where we had 60 years before women were even really starting to actively be recognized. And even then, there's so many that got left out. And so, no, you know what? I'm not going to sit there and go, oh, yeah, well, I'm glad that at least this year we got 3 women in the Best Picture lineup. That's 30%. And there are so many other films that went unrecognized. And so to just be told, well, just be glad about this, rather than being allowed to, and not that we need to be allowed, we don't need permission, but being constantly told to just be grateful is insinuating that we are being told we're not allowed to be upset or have feelings about all the ones that didn't get in.
Yeah, it's that, I mean, it's that be grateful. And we hear this a lot. We hear it a lot, and we hear it a lot outside of cinema as well. But you should be grateful that a woman got nominated for this. You should be grateful that a woman is being recognized. And it's one woman or two, it's like out of all of these hundreds of men, and primarily white men, right? And we're constantly being told like, yo, you should be grateful for that one. And I'm like, no, I'm not grateful for the one anymore. I'm tired of being told I should be grateful for the one. Do I think that the accomplishments of that woman are a good thing? Absolutely. That one woman deserves to be there. But there are 1,500 other women who also deserve to be there. And they're not getting the opportunity solely because they are women.
Yeah.
And it is just maddening. So it's like, no, I'm not grateful. I am not grateful. If anyone tells me to be grateful, just like shut the fuck up. Yes, I said it before recording, just like, I'm going to punch you with the hand that doesn't have rings on it and be grateful that it didn't. Like, that's the sensation of like, how dare you, sir? Like, and it's often sir, not always, but often. It is that sensation of just like, oh, you have to, just be grateful for this one thing that you get. And it's like, well, no, because we deserve all of the things. We deserve at least as much as what men have been given. And I think there should be some, redressing of those wrongs.
Mm-hmm. There should.
So only 3 women have won Best Director Oscars.
Also, I'm just going to say this other stat because it still makes me crazy and it keeps happening every year. Well, 2 more. No woman has ever won cinematography. We've only had 2 nominated ever.
Mm-hmm.
Still mad about that. And also no film directed by a woman. This one has an asterisk, and I will explain why in a minute. No film directed by a woman has ever been nominated for visual effects. The exception is, and this is where the asterisk comes in, the Wachowskis won for The Matrix, but would they have if they had been out?
No,
because at the time they were still, not
especially at that time. If they had been out, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, I cannot imagine that. Like, given the culture as it was now, maybe. Now I think that there would be a little bit more to that, but at the time, no.
Except for look at what happened with Matrix Resurrections. Just saying.
Oh yeah. That's because the I'm sorry, who directed that? Was it Lily Wachowski or Lena? I can't remember. I'm sorry. I always get them mixed up. I always forget who does what. But yeah, I remember all of that. And suddenly she was just like, oh, this is what the movies were actually about, by the way.
It was Lana.
and a lot of people were not happy about that one.
Yeah.
Very unhappy.
Exactly. That's why I say, like, I mean, if they had been out back in 2000, I don't think that movie would have blown up the way that it did.
Oh, that movie couldn't have been made. Like, it wouldn't have been made. It wouldn't have. So yeah, good asterisk. So again, 3 women have won Best Director Oscars. A total of 8 have been nominated for Best Directors. Said first in 1976, which in cinematic history was not that long ago. And finally, of the 3 films that we are going to talk about today, Justine Triet has been nominated for Best Director for Anatomy of a Fall, and apparently both Barbie and Past Lives directed themselves. So we just need to remember that it was a communal effort that no one really directed these 2 films.
It's magic. It just happens. Movie magic.
So let's talk about the films. We have talked so much about Barbie. I don't know if we have more really to say about the content of the film, except that, again, I'll link the things that we have talked about in the past because we love Barbie. We love Barbie in this house. Can't believe I'm actually saying that. Like my small child self would be like, "What happened to you, man? You gave in, man." Like,
you're such a sellout.
It's such a sellout. It'd be like, you'll understand when you're a little bit older, honey. Like, it's okay. It's okay, girl. I'm there. I'm there with you. Sorry.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the controversy, I guess, of surrounding the nominations for Barbie, because Barbie has received quite a number of nominations. All of them,
I believe
deserved.
It was 9. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and that includes Best Picture, Supporting Actress, Supporting Actor, Screenplay, and Best Original Songs as well.
Yes, 2 of those. And Ryan Gosling will be singing I'm Just Ken at the Oscars. Which last year when I saw Barbie, I tweeted, because I was still doing that back then. If Ryan Gosling doesn't sing I'm Just Ken at the Oscars next year, why even have the Oscars next year?
And I am 100% in support of that, as well as his supporting actor nomination. I think that he deserves it.
Absolutely, he does.
And America Ferrara has received supporting actress nod for her performance. So these are all good things. These are all deserved nominations.
By the way, I apologize. It was 8 Oscar nominations, not 9.
But of course, the big one that felt kind of missed out, and I think that some of this also kind of subsumed America Ferrara's nomination because it was so surprising in a lot of ways, is that both Greta Gerwig, who directed the film, and Margot Robbie, who starred in it and also produced it, did not get nominated. Greta Gerwig didn't get nominated for Best Director. Margot Robbie did not get nominated for Best Actress. So this is, I think that, there's been so much conversation around this. And I think some of the issues kind of get lost as a result, because then it began being compared to, going back to that, well, why aren't you grateful thing? It began being compared to like, well, you're ignoring America Ferrara. It's like, well, no, not really. We're talking about something very different. Well, you're ignoring Lily Gladstone, who received Best Actress nomination at the first Native actress to receive a Best Actress nomination. It's like, oh, well, this is spectacular. But I think that what's getting lost is in all of this conversation is that we're talking about a specific film that did get nominated for a whole bunch of Oscars, but somehow not the 2 main women involved in it. And it's a feminist film. It's a film about women, really, and about the female experience. Masculinity is definitely a part of that, but it's very much focalized through Barbie and through the experience of being a woman in the world today, basically. And the fact that the man receives the nomination, Ken, whose whole self-definition is via Barbie, and that's part of the story, and the woman who plays Barbie didn't receive anything as a result. It's maddening. It's again one of those sensations of like, almost that to a certain degree their work is being buried, that it's being taken for granted at some level. And so I think that it's one of those things where we shouldn't be comparing. We shouldn't say, well, because Lily Gladstone got nominated, we shouldn't be upset that Margot Robbie didn't.
I have so many things to say about this.
Let's go for it, Karen.
As I'm sure you know already. Well, first of all, I love that Ryan Gosling, the day of the nominations, or maybe it was the next day, I'm not sure. But he's just been nominated for an Academy Award for a really, really fantastic performance. And that's such a great thing to celebrate. And he even took a moment of his statement to say, whoa, guys, he didn't say it quite like this, but there's no Ken without Barbie. And none of this could have happened without our director. So he was one of the first people from the movie to acknowledge that, like, this is wrong what you guys did. So the thing is that a lot of people felt like it was a snub, and I really hate how much that word gets thrown around at this time of year, because I really think that words matter, and snub is like the word snub to me, that's not about like people missing. It's there's an intentionality behind it. And so when we start saying, oh, this person got snubbed, that person got snubbed, usually that's actually really really not accurate, because that there's not like a big concerted effort. Oh, we're going to make sure that this person doesn't get nominated. Sometimes the math just doesn't shake out. And I really think that that's what happened in the case of director. You had, 6 or 7 people circling 5 slots. And unfortunately, this year it was Greta Gerwig who didn't make it. And I think personally, part of the problem is that everyone kind of took for granted that she would be. And so people who may have thrown their support to her to make sure that that happened ended up just kind of like, oh, well, I'm going to support someone else because I know Greta's in. I know that kind of thing definitely happens. My bigger problem, I'm sad that she didn't get nominated. I really wanted to see that, and I was really looking forward to it, and she definitely deserves it. She directed the most popular, highest grossing movie of the year, which we know doesn't always equate, in fact, frequently does not equate to Oscar nominations. Box office and Oscars are not usually hand in hand. My biggest issue in all of this is not even that Greta and Margot weren't nominated in their categories. It's the way people have been talking about it. It's the way we've been told, well, just be glad that this happened. Just be glad Margot is nominated as a producer. So she's still nominated for Best Picture. Greta's still nominated for screenplay. It's like, okay, but they should have been nominated for director and lead actress. The fact that they're still nominees doesn't change the fact, because imagine for a second if Christopher Nolan had not been nominated for Best Director for Oppenheimer. Everyone would have lost their minds. It would have been unthinkable for that to happen. And then I see other people, I've had other people tell me, oh, well, but it's, it's not a big important movie. First of all, dude, you can't tell me that it's not an important movie. It was a very important movie to me, first of all. Second of all, a couple years ago, look at what happened with Joker. 10 Oscar nominations, including Best Director and Best Lead Actor. And everyone treats that movie like it's so important. That's a comic book movie too. And for me, it's the fact that these conversations are different. It's the fact that we can't look at, no matter what it is, we can't ever, and I say we really meaning they, men, people who don't care about this the way that we do. It's this sense of like, it does come back to the be grateful for this, because, oh, well, at least Justine Triet is nominated, but it's also just the fact that we just have these very different conversations about who deserves to be nominated and who doesn't. And when you look at certain films and you think, well, it would have been when you realize it would have been unthinkable for certain men not to be nominated for their films, but yet we're just still supposed to sit here and be glad because one person made it into the lineup of 5. No, I can't accept that. And that's not, and again, the fact that Greta didn't get in it's really disappointing. But my bigger issue is how collectively people are talking about it and what it means, and not, wow, yeah, that really sucks,
It's that consistent pitting women against each other as well. It's that sense of like, well, because this woman got in, it's like there's only one spot for a woman, any woman, and there's just that one spot, and as soon as it's filled, well, okay, you got your spot, let's move on. And it's like, no, it doesn't, like yes, if Margot Robbie got nominated for Best Actress, yes, her and Lily Gladstone would be in the same categories. They both deserve to be there. And
I would still be cheering for Lily Gladstone. Yeah, she'd still be my pick.
Absolutely, 100%. But it's like they both deserve to be there. 2 incredibly different performances, and then we could have that conversation as well. But, it's that sensation of like, you have to be, you can't even talk about it. You can't even talk about being angry about it, because then it's like, well, but you got this one thing, so why aren't you happy? It is maddening. And I think the other thing that you're also touching on is that question of genre. And the fact, and not just genre, but again, women's films. And all 3 of the films we're talking about are, quote, women's films. They centralize women. Um, and particularly with something like Barbie, which is a comedy, it's a musical, it's big and bright and flashy. There is this kind of downgrading of those kinds of films. This is a happy film. You know, we've talked about in the past about comedies and the way that comedies are treated generally, but films that centralize women and that particularly centralize female joy are not treated with the same degree of seriousness by the culture as films that centralize women and talk about pain, right? We're happy to watch women suffer. And we're just treated like, you know, we have to not find value in these things. And so there have been all of these jokes, you know, there were all the jokes about Barbenheimer and all of that stuff. There've been all of these jokes about Barbie getting nominated for things. And it's like, you don't take this film seriously because you don't think it's important. It's not important. Oppenheimer's important. Still haven't fucking seen Oppenheimer. I don't give a shit about Oppenheimer. Because I don't like Christopher Nolan. I don't care to watch hours of whatever the fuck he wants to do with that story. But it's like, Oppenheimer's important. Well, why? Why is Oppenheimer important and Barbie isn't? Like, explain it to me. Yeah. Use your words and don't be sexist.
Right. Well, and when we look at the films nominated in director, you know, you have Yorgos Lanthimos for Poor Things, which is also a film that I really liked and I really admired it. But it's like, it's very interesting because there are large chunks of that. It's a woman who, I mean, it's a Frankenstein story, but it's like a couple of different things kind of rolled into one. And I think it's very well done, but it's a woman going through a journey that is very, like, thematically you could see the similarities with Barbie, but it's obviously a very different movie and a lot more fraught, a lot more dangerous, a lot more, I don't know, it's interesting to me that people would prioritize Poor Things over Barbie, and I think there are some very specific reasons. And I don't want to say too much about Poor Things because A, that's not one of the films that we are talking about today, and B, I don't think you've seen it yet. So
no, I still have not.
Yeah, but I do think it would be a film worth talking about, and that's actually, I think, would be a very, maybe I'll write about that, a comparison of Barbie and Poor Things, because to me it's also telling that a lot of men would support Poor Things over Barbie. I think there's some additional things to be said there about it. A lot more it's not more focused on the men. No, it's not more focused on the men, but it definitely gets more into female hardship and sexuality and yeah.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that we've talked about when it comes to Barbie, about the fact that it addresses the struggles of being female generally in the world today, right? But it also addresses the joy of that and the love of that. And in fact, you know, spoiler alert, Barbie's choice at the end of the film is about wanting to be a woman, a human, right? A human woman. And the fact, you know, in some ways, and I think we've talked about this in various guises over really the course of this podcast, there is a serious resistance to understanding being female as something that might actually be desirable and joyful, and not being like, this is, you know, constant suffering. This is the constant experience of suffering. And one of the things that Barbie does is it says being female is hard, and it is also wonderful, and it's good, and we want to be women, right? Yeah. And that's very, very important. That's a very important part of the message of the film. And there are a lot of people who are very resistant to that.
Yes.
Who don't want to be told that, you know, it's like, no, being a woman is terrible. It's like, it's not actually.
Right. Being a woman is awesome when we don't have to deal with things that are put upon us. When we get to just live our lives.
Just like, yeah, exactly. So I do think, I think there's a lot of stuff that's going into it. I mean, at the end of the day, Barbie is a major cultural marker. It's going to be around for a long time. It kind of, by necessity, it has to be. So, and that is its value, regardless of whether or not it wins 100 Oscars or whether it wins none, anything. But it is, when we talk about these things, we really do need to know, as you say, the way that we talk about films like this, and particularly women that are involved in it, and the way that we don't talk about men in the same way. Yeah. So I think that's very important. So any final thoughts about like Barbie generally before we go on to do a little bit more in-depth discussion of the other two films here?
Just that it is still my favorite film of 2023.
It's so good.
It is.
It's so good. It makes me so happy. All right. So let's go on to discuss the other two films, and the first one is nominated for Best Director as well as Best Picture, Actress, Original Screenplay, and Editing, and that is Anatomy of a Fall, directed by Justine Triet and starring who's in this? Trying to remember her name. Sandra Hüller.
Yeah,
Sandra
Hüller.
Sandra Hüller.
I can't speak German. Sorry.
This is a fascinating film, honestly. I just watched both this and Past Lives this week. Two very different movies, and very different from Barbie as well. It's like, oh, there's a whole spectrum of stuff going on here. But I thought this one was fantastic. It is, in a general sense, it is about a woman who lives in a mountain chalet near Grenoble. She's a writer. She's married with a son who has, I can never tell, he's not blind, but he's got limited eyesight.
Yeah, he's essentially blind. He can only see some shadows and some shapes. Like, so basically, yeah, he can't really see anything in detail. He can't see color.
And so Sandra gets brought up on charges for the possible murder of her husband, Samuel, who apparently falls or perhaps is pushed from the third floor of their chalet, hits
or
the
maybe
ground.
he jumped.
Or maybe he jumped, yeah, and that's part of the whole falls, is pushed, jumped, and most of the film is taken up both with the police investigation and then primarily with the trial, focusing on whether or not she can be said to be guilty of his murder, and what all of that means. And so much of this film is, it's very much like referential, obviously, to something like Anatomy of a Murder, but it is very much about memory and about experience and about the way that not just that, but also how you can shape the events in someone's life and make it come out that they are monstrous or that they are completely innocent, and the way that different people experience these events. It's a really fascinating film. It's got great performances. It was so stressful. I watched this, I did not see this in a theater. It was so stressful that I had to pause it numerous times as I was watching it. It probably took me twice as long to watch the film as it should have, because I was like, I gotta stop. I need to walk around the room a little bit. It was just too much. It was so intense in places. And I was getting so angry as well. But I think that that's one of its strengths. It does try to give you this emotional reaction to the trial, to what is being said, to how events are being shaped, and to how your sympathies also shift and what you think actually happened. It's a very fluid film. I really liked the way in which we see these different images, we hear these different sounds, we hear these different interpretations of the events, and also just the memories, not just of Sandra, but of her son, and of how those memories are shaped and how they're changed and how trustworthy memories even are. So yeah, I just thought it was a remarkable film in a lot of ways. And if this is the way that the French justice system works, I, for once, am very glad that I live in the United States, because boy.
So I did do some Googling and some looking things up, because when I first saw this a few months ago, I was just like, wow, I thought our system was messed up. There's no way this case could ever go to trial in the United States, no matter who it was involved. It just wouldn't happen. And so, yeah, I found myself very grateful for that. Speaking of being grateful, but no, this is not how the French justice system would really operate either. So there are certain things that they do get right. Like they are allowed to kind of crosstalk and stuff, and defendants, I guess, are also allowed to ask questions and say things. But but no, this case wouldn't have gone to trial with the lack of evidence that they had.
Well, I mean, it's not so much the lack of evidence, I think, that got me, was the way that the lawyers talk to each other. And the way, and that exactly that kind of crosstalk, the way that, one was allowed to, both of them really, but the way that they were allowed to kind of shape testimony and discuss testimony and be like, well, is this what you think happened? All of that kind of thing.
Yeah, apparently that stuff is all allowed.
See, that's
for me, my biggest issue was that this case never should have been in a courtroom anyway.
I mean, it probably shouldn't have. I kind of understand. Like, I'm willing to go along with that a little bit, because it's like, yeah, I mean, it's there are a number of American films where I'm like, no one would have brought this to trial in reality.
No.
But it's more the way that it's treated within the courtroom and the arguments that happen. And the kind of like, and the number of times I'm just like, leading the witness. That's a leading. I know this shit. Like, I do not have an extensive experience with the court system, but I know that's not okay. Yeah, all of that kind of thing was just like, and I think it's very effective because it does shift your sympathies, and it does also present the way that perception works, right? Let me explain how you should perceive what happened. And understand, there's one of the central issues is this recording of a fight that they have before he dies. Right. Like the day before he dies, they have this big fight, and there's this question of like, what are we actually hearing? And what does that actually mean? What really happened? And there are different interpretations of the sounds that we're hearing. And I quite liked the fact that for part of that fight, we get this sort of flashback. So we get this visual of the two of them, the escalation of the argument, right?
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, that flashback cuts off, and all we hear are the sounds. And that's where, and so we've seen this escalation. We're like, okay, we can hear in their voices, basically, this is what's happening. And then at a certain point, you're like, okay, what actually happened after that? And there are multiple different explanations for it. And I quite liked that fact.
Yeah, I really like that it is this mystery of who was responsible for what really happened here, what went on between the two of them, what was their relationship actually like. And it doesn't tell you who to believe. It doesn't tell you who to agree with, but it does take you on this journey where you do realize that just because you hear, like, this is one of my biggest takeaways from the movie is just a reminder that just because you hear a recording doesn't mean that you actually understand the context that comes with, and doesn't mean that you really know what's happening. If you see a video, there's so often there are things that you're not seeing that are part of that contributed to the moment that you're watching. And so just remembering those things, I think it's really good. But I really like the way Trier builds this story so that everything always feels a little bit off balance. You're never quite sure. Okay, well, like, I had several times where I was like, yeah, I'm totally on her side. First of all, what a jerk blasting that music, like whether she did anything or not, like I'm on her side that if she did do it, he had it coming, Yeah,
there are a few moments just like, no, she should have just killed him. Even if she didn't, she should have just killed him.
But then there are times where I'm just like, oh, I don't know. Like they kind of both have some point. I never was fully on his side ever, but there were times where I was like, okay, maybe she's not so perfect, and maybe there were some things that are helpful to know.
Well, and
But
that's the thing. I think we only see him very briefly, and the longest scene that we have of him is the flashback is during the fight, right?
right.
So there's all of this info, and we know her a lot better, and we know, her flaws, and we also know her good points in the way that she has shaped the narrative. So there is this, like, there's a whole section of their life that we are not privy to as viewers.
Right.
So yeah, there, and the arguments that are being made publicly, right, are then also shaping the way that we react to it. And honestly, and even just, the audience in a lot of ways is put in kind of the position of a juror. And of like, how would you understand what, you're going to walk away with? What are you going to take away from this story? Who is culpable? Who isn't? What actually happened? And even down to things like, I'm just like, well, I just don't like that guy. I just don't like that the prosecuting attorney. I just don't like the husbands. Like, I don't. And of course that's part of the point, I think, is that you're having this reaction that is an emotional one and that isn't necessarily analytical. And then you're trying to decide, okay, but what is the truth? And how much of it is the truth as well, because her memories are obviously very shaped. So how much does she know about what actually happened?
Right.
Obviously she would know whether or not she killed him, hit him over the head and tried to shove him off the balcony or anything like that. But she might know she might not really understand or be completely, separated from what led to that. It's the same thing with the fight that we hear. We can see the escalation between the two of them, but how much of it is being shaped by their own psyches, her interpretations, his all of those needs and desires and bits of anger that are coming out. What's the truth, and can you really arrive at it?
Yeah.
It's a really interesting film, and I think it's cinematically, it's so hard to get this kind of story right because so much of it is about perception. But it does, like you said, it keeps you off balance for a lot of it. And also props to I keep on blanking on it, Sandra Hüller, because there's this other issue of language and of, speaking German, speaking English, and speaking French. And there's this period where she's being told she has to only communicate in French in the courtroom, and she doesn't speak it very well.
Yeah, it's not her native language.
Yeah, and so I would have loved, my French is terrible at this point. I do not speak German at all. But if you've spent any time in a country where you don't speak the language, you imperfectly speak the language, being able to communicate in another language effectively, especially in something like this where the mode of communication and the words being chosen are so important. That's hard to do. And so there's this other layer to her testimony and to the way that she communicates, that I think is partially lost on just people who are native English speakers, because we're not hearing the way that her French might be different from the way that the other people speak French. But it's a very interesting element to the rest of the film of like, this isn't, it's, this memory and perception, but also how is she actually wording things? And what does that mean?
Yeah. I love that it doesn't matter if she did it or not. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, when you get to the end of the film, and we as an audience would love to have, and like typically an audience would love to have an answer, and the ambiguous ending sometimes is like, but come on, man, just tell me, just give me a hint, and I think that ultimately when you get to the end, are we spoiling it?
Yeah, let's spoil it. Let's warn people if you have not seen this film yet. To move forward about 5 or 6 minutes probably. And so we will spoil this now. Yeah.
So ultimately she is acquitted. And then, she goes out to dinner, they're celebrating that she has essentially won. And she acknowledges that she doesn't feel as relieved as she thought she would, or kind of expected to. But there's not any sort of like indication that that's because she has guilt or anything like that. And then she just kind of goes back home to her son, and they have a moment where, they kind of talk about a few things, and then she just sits down on the couch with the dog, the very, very sweet dog. But there's no hint one way or the other if she's actually innocent or guilty. And I really actually love that was the choice, that they don't, because ultimately it really doesn't matter. For me, being the legal nerd that I am, I was just so mad that this case ever went to trial, regardless of whether she did it or not, that I was just like, yeah, it doesn't matter, because really what this movie is about is breaking down this relationship, like analyzing it, and then also the way that because of certain bits of or fragments of evidence, people are just so quick to jump to conclusions about her without really knowing or caring about really what the truth is. And so to not even answer that question really tells me this isn't what the movie was about. It's not about whether she's guilty or innocent. It's about the way she was treated in the process.
Yeah, I
by
think
everybody.
I think that's a really good point. And yeah, it does have that ambiguity. There is no, I knew it wasn't going to do it, but I'd hate to say it, a Hollywood film would have very much been like, there have this little punctuation of truth, right? Some kind of solution, just like, yes, she did it, or no, she didn't do it.
Yeah.
And similar to actually what happens in Anatomy of a Murder, which is an ambiguous film in a lot of ways as well, and very much is related to this one. But and there are all kinds of other things involved with that as well. But this, I agree with you. I think the ambiguity works, and it doesn't, like you say, it doesn't feel unsatisfying. It doesn't feel like, ooh, I'm really discombobulated. It's like, well, at this point, it doesn't matter. Like that's not really what it was about.
Right.
And I do have to say, before we go on to past lives, the sexism on display.
Yeah.
Throughout this film, that's one of the things. That's where I began. Like, part of why I got so stressed was just like, no, I'm so mad about this. But yeah, it does highlight the sexism of France, and but also just the assumptions made about a woman who is successful, right, and her husband who is not successful in the same way, who wants to be successful. The guilt that they both have over what happened to their son, but particularly him. But again, his guilt is all filtered through what we understand of him, because we don't see it. We don't see the buildup to it. It's only through other people that we get that. So but the way that she is talked about and the way that she is treated within the courtroom, and not just by the prosecuting attorney and some of the witnesses, but also by the judge. Yeah. And the dismissal, the willingness to accept certain things about her, and about like her stealing parts of his story, or the way that she treated him, and the pushing back against this evil, like this kind of turning her into this harridan, this harpy who's just like trying to control him and trying to have all the power in the relationship. It's that manipulation of the audience's sympathy as well, because I'm going to have a reaction to that. I'm immediately going to be like, no, she didn't do it, let her off. Like, but of course that's again part of the point. But it does kind of highlight the way that women are treated within the system, and the way that this woman who's behaving outside, who's not only a foreigner, but is also behaving outside of the way that women are supposed to behave, and that's how it's all being shaped.
Yeah. I know this is really random, but last night I was listening to some of the music from Chicago, and He Had It Coming came on, and I was just, as you were talking, I was just thinking, yeah, the line, he had it coming, or I didn't do it, but if I done it, how can you tell me I was wrong?
I mean, there's a little bit of that in places, and it's like, and I think that the film does well at, like, this is not a good thing.
Yeah,
people should not die. But also there is a little bit of like, well, maybe he deserved it. I mean, me a little bit.
Yeah, like, I mean, is anybody really sad that he's dead? Besides maybe his kid.
His kid, yes, his son is very sad, and also I do like the use of the son in this. He wants to believe his mom, but he's also afraid because he doesn't know. Like everybody
Right.
else, he doesn't know, and he makes a number of decisions as well, about what he thinks he knows, or even what he needs to be protected from or not protected from. Uh, and it's just a really well balanced film in a lot of ways. I liked it a great deal.
Yeah, it's very good. And I also just wanted to acknowledge Sandra Hüller. She's nominated for Best Actress for Anatomy of a Fall. She also stars in another Best Picture nominee this year, Zone of Interest, which is also an excellent film.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one yet.
It's so good.
I didn't realize
also
what that film was about.
Oh yeah, it's also very difficult to watch, but so good.
Jeez, she was the lead in Tony Erdmann, wasn't she?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. So Anatomy of a Fall right now is available to rent, and I believe it's supposed to be on Hulu, I think sometime this month or in the next couple of months. So it is very worth seeing.
Definitely.
So let's move on to a very, very different film. Also about memory, though, also about centralizing female characters and perception and language, and
being an immigrant,
being in a different country where you do not speak the language, learning, being in a relationship with someone that isn't from your culture, all kinds of things. So the film that we want to talk about is Past Lives, directed and written by Celine Song, and starring Greta Lee, Teo Yu, and John Magaro. And this one, I say, is a very different film. This is about two people two Korean teenagers, Na Young and Hae Sung, who are classmates and are very they got a crush on each other. They're they're sort of, it's that age of adolescent boyfriend girlfriend kind of thing. To write it back to Barbie.
Yes.
And she moves away. She goes initially to Canada with her family. Her family decides to immigrate, and they lose touch with each other because they were childhood friends, and it just sort of peters out and everything. They reconnect 12 years later, and sort of start this interesting friendship / potential romance online as they're communicating. She is now a playwright living in New York. He has just finished his military service, so he's starting university basically. And then the entire film is about this kind of long relationship that they have, and the amount of time that they spend apart, and the kind of moment when they actually come together again, and how their lives change, and what their lives could have potentially been if they hadn't made some of the decisions that they did, not just as children, but much more so as adults. This is just a gorgeous film in so many ways. It's very well paced. One of the things I really liked about it was the fact that it allowed for silences. It allowed for kind of the building of the connections between people, but it didn't dwell on it so long that it became tiresome. It was very well organized as a film, and so we get the sensation of this connection between the two of them, even as they spend most of the film apart, and only connect through voice or through computer, and then eventually are able to directly meet each other again after 24 years. And so the whole film is very much just about their two experiences, and particularly hers, how she changes because of immigrating, and because of the choices that she makes about what she wants her life to be. So yeah, Karen, what are your thoughts on Past Lives?
Oh, I thought this movie is so beautiful. I saw it months ago, and I was hoping to get a chance to watch it again this week, but I didn't. So I'm working off of 6 months, 6 months of movies that I've watched in between. But the beauty and just the loveliness of this film has really resonated with me and has stuck with me. I think one of the things that I really like so much about it is that it does connect sort of culture and some spiritual ideas and concepts, this idea of past lives and how you could be something to somebody in one life, and then maybe in the next you just don't get those same opportunities, but maybe at some point in the future you'll get to reconnect in that way again. But also it's not just about this this spiritual idea, but also the reality too, in their real world, like the current life that they're living. They had this past life as 12-year-olds where they got to be together, and then they reconnected, and then they lost contact again. And so it's like all of these are parts of their past lives within the same life that they're currently living. And I just think that using those ideas, I think Celine does such a great job. Celine Song does such a great job of really bringing all of that together to create this beautiful story about two people who have this love for each other, but they also understand that life just had other plans. And yeah. I think that's one of the things where sometimes you just want people to just throw their lives away and run off together, but other times like that would just not make things good. Like that there's no way that would end happily for anybody. And it's not really about that. It's just about acknowledging these connections that you have with people and letting them breathe and being grateful for them when you have those opportunities.
Yeah, the concept of in Yun, which is what the past lives concept that they talk about a lot. I had to look it up to be certain I remembered what it was called. Which is this whole idea of that people that I think the way that she describes it in the film, I think is like, if you accidentally brush past someone in the street, you have in Yun with that person. There's some connection that you have had in a past life. And it might simply be that, and there's all this conversation, it might simply be that you sat on the train next to them once, right? Or it might be that you were in this like passionate love affair or something, but there are these layers of connection between people that you have those moments with. And that's one of the things that they talk about, and particularly nearing the end of the film when they actually, meet again, directly, physically, and have this whole conversation about like, what were we to each other? We know what we are to each other now, but what were we to each other then? And there's this whole conversation about perhaps this is a past life, this is, who knows what we are to each other in the next life, and what that will actually look like. And so, it is this, it's a wonderful concept, that, there's these layers of connections between people that might not, be positive even in the past, but maybe brought them a little bit closer now and changed the way that they treated each other and reacted to each other in this moment. And so there's this wonderful fluidity to the film, I think. And like you say, showing the past life within their current life, they're not the same people that they were when they were 12 years old, but they also are, because they grew out of those children. Right. And the relationship kept them connected in some way, even through all of these changes that they've gone through. It's a very, one of the other things that I like is that they actually verbalize these things. It's not, there's a lot of subtlety in the film, but they actually have these conversations. Like her husband, Arthur, talks to her. There's an extensive scene with the two of them, and he's understandably like, I don't know how to feel, right? I don't know how I feel about this guy that, you have this really long connection with. And, he's kind of going to the what ifs, right? And they have this conversation that's not like her reassuring him or saying like, oh no, don't worry about it or anything. It's just like, she's basically like, but this is who I am now, right? I might have been someone else if other things had happened, but that's not who I am. That's not the relationship. And I do like that at the end of all of that, she also says, well, the thing you didn't mention is that I love you. But it's just like, well, what if this had happened with that? Okay, but also I love you. So and I like that because it's very realistic to all of them. It's realistic to her. And it's realistic to that kind of, his doubts of being like, I don't know how to deal with this.
Yeah.
Well,
and I think it's really fair to that situation. And I think it's also reflective of a lot of actual human relationships, not the movie ones where we get these big overreactions, but I have so many friends who are married or in serious long-term relationships, and when someone from the past resurfaces, there are conversations about it, not fights, not like, well, if you go have dinner with that person, I'm leaving you, or whatever. It's like, okay, I acknowledge that this is something that's important to you, but also I acknowledge that I have feelings about it,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's one of the things that is handled very beautifully, because Arthur, yeah, like you say, I mean, understandably and quite obviously, he's conflicted, but he also is there for her because she loves him, but he loves her too. And so, when she gets into her emotions about this whole situation, he's there for her because they have a good relationship and they're secure and they're supportive of one another.
Yeah, I like that relationship is represented very positively. Again, there's so many places where this film could have gone to a very mainstream space, and very like, oh, we're going to do the cliched thing, right? And it's not. And his, and a lot of the fears that he has are also connected to culture and connected to the fact that this is not only someone from your past, but someone with whom you share a culture and a world that I've never and can never fully be a part of.
Right.
And part of the point at which he begins getting visibly nervous is when she's constantly talking about Korea and about, oh, he's so Korean. And in fact, in that scene, I was just like, if you say Korea one more time, like, this poor man is about to like get really upset, really nervous about all of this. He is getting anxious. But it's understandable because she has these connections. She has this past that she hasn't been back to Korea, right? In so many years. She left when she was a child, but she has a connection to it. And she has a connection to the culture that she has lost in a certain way, but also not lost in another way. Yeah. He talks to her at one point about like, when you dream in Korean. And he wants, he's learning Korean because he wants to understand what she's saying in her sleep. It's those elements of connection and also fear, and knowing that you can't be a part of that, and it would be true regardless, even if they grew up in the same country or in the same town, there would still be this past that they would not be able to bridge with each other because they experience different things. So yeah, it's such a well done film and very moving and very, again, sympathetic. You feel I liked everybody. I was like, I like these people. They're their own people, It is also a film that I live in New York City, and there were points which I just like, oh, I miss New York so much. Some of those places just like, oh, that's like, oh, I know that path. Like there's a path that they walk from, I think it's the Manhattan Bridge to the Brooklyn Bridge. I know that path. I'm just like, oh, I haven't been there in a while. I can't wait for spring to come and I can walk down there.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, I love New York City. I miss you. And I look out my window. It's like, oh, yes, I live here. That's right. I can go there. It'll be smelly and there will be construction, but that's all right.
Part of why you love it, right?
Love it. Gotta love this terrible place. So
but yeah, I think Past Lives is just so beautiful. And it's funny because I mean, I really like Anatomy of a Fall and I'm very happy for Justine Triet, but it's just so funny because when people have had these, oh, well, at least Justine's in the director lineup. Of the three, she would have been my third choice. I'm still happy. I am happy for her. All three of them should have been in, but it's like, I love what Celine Song did with Past Lives. I think it's just so beautiful. And she doesn't she doesn't dwell too long on anything, but she does allow certain moments to linger in ways that just really show that she has a good handle on timing and on really how to convey the full range of emotions on screen.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's a wonderful film. And we will know if any of these films win anything next weekend.
Yes.
Right?
It's coming right up.
Yeah. It's the 10th. So the Academy Awards is on the 10th, I believe. Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. Sunday. I've been
They're doing them an hour earlier this year.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice for me.
Yeah. They're doing it because they keep breaking into like late night programming on the East Coast. And so now this year they're doing it an hour earlier. And Abbott Elementary is having a post Oscars episode, like how they always have, like whatever network the Super Bowl is on, they always have like, after the Super Bowl, watch this. This year it's after the Oscars, watch Abbott Elementary. This is not sponsored by ABC, but we will accept your money if you would like to send it to us.
I love Abbott Elementary.
Oh, it's a great show. It's so good.
Been really happy to see it come back. Yeah, so the Oscars are coming up. I completely forgotten that the Oscars were happening even. But I will probably do my traditional thing. And this time I'll be shit-faced by 8:00 instead of 9.
There you go.
Can't wait. It's my favorite time of year. And that's the point at which I stopped caring about who won or who didn't. Or think that I hallucinated someone slapping someone else. Like, it's like, what the I was really drunk. Did that actually happen? Like, wow.
Nope, you're imagining it. It was nothing.
It was nothing. Didn't happen. So I think that will probably wrap us up. Any final thoughts about the Oscars before we close?
Go Lily. Go Barbie.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to hear Ryan Gosling sing I'm Just Ken on the stage.
It's
gonna be magical.
That at the very least will be fun. Like, yes. I will be there for that, definitely. So that is gonna wrap us up. Most Past Lives is available to watch on Paramount Plus with Showtime. That is something that I was not aware of. So I have a subscription to Paramount Plus for the month without realizing that I needed to have Showtime too.
Oh, I thought they were just together now.
No, you have to add on Showtime for even more money. And lame. They can't have my money. Sorry. Very few streamers have my money at this point. So that is going to close us out for this week. Thank you all so much for listening. And of course, we want to extend a thank you to our patrons. And we have a few new ones as well. So we're excited about that. So thank you so much to Abby, Ali, Brian, Connor, Estefania, Heather, James, Judy, Karen, Carriata, Matt, Michelle, Monty, Nanina, Robert, Steve, Sharon, and Tao. If you would like to join their number, our Patreon is patreon.com/citizendame, and you do get little buttons and stickers and access to episodes early, as well as bonus episodes. We should have a bonus episode coming up very shortly, sometime this month.
Yes.
There are things that we want to talk about. So that's our Patreon is patreon.com/citizendame. And we do have our Etsy store now, etsy.com/shop/citizendamepod, and a Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/citizendame. And of course, you can go to our website and read our reviews and editorials and all of Karen's Sundance stuff. And that is citizendamepod.com. Of course, you can get in touch with us a multitude of ways. Our email is citizendamepod@gmail.com. And we are on various socials, primarily on Instagram and Blue Sky for the socials at Citizen Dame Pod. And we are a Letterboxd HQ at Citizen Dame. And the Letterboxd HQ, you can also get links to all of our old episodes, as well as lists and articles and fun things. And we enjoy Letterboxd a lot. I enjoy Letterboxd a lot.
Letterboxd is the best.
It is. And of course, you can get in touch with us individually. Karen, where are you?
I am on all the socials, but mostly Instagram and Letterboxd at Karen M. Peterson.
And I am also on all the socials, but mostly Instagram and Letterboxd at LH Business. And so that will close us out for this week. Thank you so much for listening.
Bye. Men just need to stop.